Right, good morning, Year 11, and anyone else who's watching this series. Don't know if you can see the screen terribly well. I've tried to do better than the last time. I did my side notes, and I believe that I'm wearing an ensemble that is too dark for... Oh, no, this is all wrong. Too dark for the light to pick up on this. However, if you've got access to the PowerPoint, if you don't, do email me, I can get it to you. You'll discover that on slide, whatever slide this is, slide 3, it says there. Slide 3, you'll find this series of questions. Now, they're based on a series of sources on the final slide, which I believe is slides... Oh, no, not the final slide, I lie. Slide 5. So the way it works, and the way this links into A-level, is that all the information that I've already given you now is used to back up inferences from source material. So you divide the page into 8 sections. Each section has a source, and using the source, each of the 8 sources, you say, well, as many of the questions as you can. The idea is that not all of the sources will answer all of the questions. You've got to work out which questions can be answered and how, and where possible, give evidence to back up what you say. That could be from a quote, it could be from an inference that you draw from the source. For example, you could look at who provided medical care, maybe they tell you about something, what treatments were used, what do they think caused disease and illness, and what was the general health of these people like. Now bear in mind we're talking about prehistory, and bear in mind what I said in the side notes about how much of the different time period that covers. We're talking, well, about 1.2 million years of human history, and as a consequence you're going to end up with sources that say different things. That is going to happen. But again, here's the other A-level skill. The ability to take multiple different viewpoints, put them all together, and then try and make some kind of cohesive whole out of those very different viewpoints that makes sense, can be backed up by the evidence, and that has that give in it, that can go over both sides. You'll find most of history is like this. The idea behind Medicine Through Time, when it was a course, was a broad sweep. It was designed to do this. So if I fail to skip on because I've hit the wrong button. Hang on. It's all gone wrong. There we go. That's better. If I skip on, you'll see this is what the double page spread looks like. I'm assuming you can still see that, and my ensemble hasn't made it impossible to see. It's 8 sections with 8 sources. The first one is this, the Prehistory cave painting from Trefoir Cave in France, and the idea was, okay, does it tell us about who provided medical care? Well, on its own, no. With other information, you may talk about other things, but I'll talk about that more later. Does it tell us about their theories about cause of illness? I'll just dip out a shot, don't mind me. Kind of does. It implies, given that we've got a ceremonial thing here, that their theories are superstitious and they're based on things you cannot see. They're not common sense. Unless dressing like an antelope is common sense where you are. It might be, I don't know. Certainly it isn't for me. Does it tell you about what treatments were used? Well, no, not a great deal actually. We don't know why they dressed like this. It could be to do with health. It could not be. Does it tell you what the general health of people was like? No. Though it does tell us an interesting idea that they understand the differences in anatomy, and that is a rather anatomically correct drawing of a human. I'll say no more. Next source was this one, chickweed plant. The chickweed plant is to do with properties to do with sort of stomachache and what have you, and the fact is we find it growing wherever we find human habitation. This implies that they know about it, that they use it, and I was talking earlier about poop. They poop out the seeds. So we know that prehistoric people were perhaps using this. So it's good to tell us about the general health. We know that they have intestinal problems. It's good to tell us about medical care. They're using common sense remedies. You get the idea. If you're good at this, you'll pause now, fill these in, and then come back. So anyway, I'm assuming you've done that now. The next one is the trepan and trephin skulls, the circular pieces cut. What does it tell us? It doesn't tell us who provided medical care. That's not anything we can gather from this. It doesn't tell us about their general health, apart from the idea that maybe there's something going on with their head, perhaps headaches, perhaps migraines. We don't really know. Does it tell us about what treatments were used? Well, yeah, it tells us that trepanning and trephinning was used, we think. Does it tell us about the general health? Well, yeah, actually it does. Remember, these have bone growth. They survive this operation. That tells us that the medical care they use must be pretty decent because they're not dying of infection from an open wound, which we're assuming cutting a hole in your head would leave. That's pretty useful information. Source 4 is... the tomb skeletons at Isbister. Only 2% of people have broken bones. Most of them showed evidence of healing. This means they know how to set bones. This is one of those ways we know that they use clay pots. We know they set bones. We know they use splints. It doesn't tell us who provided medical care. It doesn't tell us about the general health, though I suppose it does. 2% broken bones. The hard physical labour that was associated with Neolithic life. That implies that, well, maybe it's not as bad as we thought. And they show evidence of healing. Prehistoric cave painting here, you've got missing fingers. Now we have no idea why these fingers were missing. Does that tell us that life is dangerous? Does that tell us that this is unusual, therefore worthy of report? Or does it tell us that it's fairly common and therefore everyone's doing it? We don't know. Your call, and can you back it up? Source 6 is the rate of death. Very few lived over the age of 40. Most women died between the ages of 15 and 24. That's fascinating. Doesn't tell us who provided medical care. It doesn't tell us much about what treatments they use, but it does tell us about their general health. It tells us that it's a punishing lifestyle. It tells us that humans don't get to relax very much. You're working your whole life and then you die. It also tells us that the vast majority of women probably died during childbirth because of that 15 to 24 bracket. Those of you who are sociologists who want to do sociology, we'll talk about this more next year. We talk about child rearing age, 15 to 44. It's extended, but 15 to 24 implies they died during childbirth. Source 7 is a hill fort in Hampshire. Now, note, this is a hill fort. This is in the Bronze Age, but it's on the cusp. Writing hasn't been discovered yet. So, in Britain at least, in Hampshire, this is still the Neolithic, even though the Bronze Age has now kicked in fully. What does this mean? It means that these people are farmers, and I told you before that something terrible must have happened in order for people to go to farming rather than hunting and being nomadic. This tells us that information. 30% of the skulls indicated that people did not have enough iron in their blood, i.e. they weren't eating right, they weren't eating enough meat, or iron-rich products. I suppose if you're a vegetarian you know the difference. Rickets, a disease caused by a poor diet and resulting in bone deformities, was pretty common. This implies that settling down on agriculture and living on a farm isn't good for human beings. It's actually quite terrible. So it tells us a lot about the change in lifestyle, and it tells us that the nomadic lifestyle was perhaps better for humans than the settled, sedentary, agricultural lifestyle. Now, obviously nowadays things are different, but this is interesting, and it tells us the difference between the Neolithic and the Bronze Age that's coming in, but this is still Stone Age. My point being, don't over-romanticise the Stone Age. It's not a great place. The final source, source 8, there we go, is about the muscles and the musculature, which we can tell from the bones themselves, and this osteoarthritis, i.e. large muscles in the legs. We know that they're overused. These people travel a lot by foot, probably too much for humans. It's that weird thing about walking too far. Humans were clearly involved in heavy physical labour. None of these really tell us who provides healthcare, unless you go back to that first one and you use context, about which more in a second. But as I say, if you're interested in the slide of sources, I'm not sure how easy it is to see on here. I'll skip through again. There they are. If you don't have the PowerPoint, I'm not sure whether this is clear, but I'll do my best. There are the sources you can use. That draws this particular one to almost a close, because the next thing we do is this. What can you learn from the archaeological evidence about prehistoric medicine? Now, this, and one of the problems, was the idea of interpretation and inference. So what can we learn? We can learn a great deal. There's a lot we don't know. There isn't a lot of it. We don't know where to look for more, and that we do have is unexplained. On its own, it tells us nothing. That source I just showed you of the antelope man in France has issues, and we need to look at those. We need another form of evidence to back this up. Now I'm going to bring this video, it's fairly short, to a close and see if I can put the next one up relatively quickly. Sorry about the delay on these, but it's a busy time here. So thank you very much for watching, if you have been, and stay indoors. I mean, at home.